You're listening to Radio Primavera Sound, proudly presented by Cupra.
Welcome to Line Noise. You may remember, probably not, a few weeks ago I did a post about reaching 200 line noises, and one of the things I said was some of my dream guests at the end. You can go back and check this, and one of the dream guests was Deep Dish, the Washington DC house group who I first started listening to in the 90s, but who are very much back at the moment. And they're here. Well, not here, but I interviewed them via the means of Google Meets. I was very happy to do so. They are Ali Dubfire, Shirazinia and Sharam Tayebi. We talked about industrial house, we talked about their unique sound, we talked about loving drum and bass, we talked about Iran, Washington DC, remixes, which obviously Deep Dish are an absolute specialist at, and why getting back together in 2025 feels so right. 2025, I should say. I think I went a bit overboard on that. We talked about the new material as well, which, all being well, should be out by the time you listen to it. And they're playing loads of gigs, and it's going to be fantastic. So Line Noise comes to you with the support of Cupra. Oh, I should say as well, before we start, that we start off just me and Ali, and Sharam comes in later. All right, enjoy it. But look, I was obviously saying before we were recording, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Ali, it's an absolute pleasure that you're getting back together. We're going to be talking about new music and reunions and stuff. But if it's all right, I wanted to go right back to the start, because one thing that's always fascinated me about Deep Dish is like how you got your sound. Because I always think of it like a sort of, it's house, but it's slightly industrial, and it doesn't sound like anyone else. Like, how did you get that sound?
I mean, it's a testament to the fact that Sharam comes from one angle, and like he's always been very much into, you know, house music and European, like whether it's American, Chicago, Detroit, New York, whatever. And also he was really always into like disco, Italo house, like the more European kind of sounds. And my approach was always from an alternative indie, place. And so like, I think Deep Dish, the magic of Deep Dish is like those two sensibilities kind of coming together. And sometimes, there's always like, sometimes it's a serious argument. Sometimes it's a very lighthearted argument. It's a creative struggle between us in terms of like, pushing our individual kind of agendas, musical agendas and ideas into whatever we're working on. And sometimes Sharam wins, sometimes I win. We always, I think that middle ground, is where like the magic of Deep Dish kind of lies. It's always been a shared vision, but sometimes it leans heavily more in my direction and sometimes more in his direction. And I think that makes it interesting for the listeners, for the fans, and also for us.
Do you think coming from Washington, DC, rather than Chicago or New York or Detroit, did that kind of give you a step remove as well and kind of enable you to come up with your own sound?
I think for sure, yeah. Because I mean, while there were certain artists that came from the DC area, we felt like we were on like this island unto ourselves. We would make regular trips to New York or Detroit or Chicago, especially to New York. We spent a lot of time going to the clubs there, and this is why like people like, we really still to this day we look up to people like Masters of Work, Danny Tenaglia, Todd Terry, David Morales, Frankie Knuckles when he was still with us. That really formed our foundation. And then, people like Carl Craig became a mentor. And I was really, really heavily into the Detroit sound. So it was just all of these influences kind of coming together with ideas that we felt like weren't necessarily being explored musically by any of those artists or labels that we were following. And part of it is also like when you sit down sometimes to make music, especially early in your career, there's artists that you look up to, and you sit down, you try to like do something like them or do something as good as them. And somehow in that pursuit of trying to mimic your favorite artists, you come, away with your own sound, in trying to achieve something else. You realize after a while that like, hey, well, we actually have a sound that people are gravitating towards. And so now we can kind of explore that. We can explore, and that gives you the confidence, I guess, to realize that you have something to say, um, and that you're unique among all the other dance music producers and artists around the world. So
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but do you think that the fact your sort of Iranian backgrounds influenced that as well? I mean, did that? I think you came to the US at 7. Is that right?
yeah, I was 7 years old. I came during the revolution. Sharam came in, I think, 84 or 85. I don't see any correlation between our Persian roots and what we did as deep dish. The only thing I would say about culture is like it just kept us grounded. We have a very strong work ethic. So and we're very closely tied to our families, and I think that kept us, on the right track all these years, and it kept us, I guess, inspired. We had the support of the family. A lot of people in our culture, they don't, like the family want you to like go into a more respectable, career direction. And we chose what we chose, and fortunately for us, we had the support of our family and our friends, and I think that became our foundation, to this day.
We were speaking earlier that you spent a lot of your youth playing guitar in bands. What were they like?
Yeah.
Were they like hard rock bands or indie bands or?
I mean, I used to do talent shows, and I would play with whoever was like a budding musician that had an instrument. It didn't really go anywhere, although I think some of the people I played for ended up being in a band. I remember one of the guys that I played with started a band with some other people, and they opened for Nine Inch Nails on the tour that Trent did for Pretty Hate Machine. So there was, things like that happening. But yeah, it wasn't, nothing really materialized. And then I was like always skipping college classes and hanging out at this record store called Yesterday and Today Records, which was very close to the college. And like Guy from Fugazi worked there. Brendan, the drummer of Fugazi, worked there. Brendan Canty. That was the big hangout for people like Ian McKay from Discord. Dave Grohl, I would see him in there before the Foo Fighters, before Nirvana. So it was a real like meeting place for all the local punk musicians, punk and hardcore musicians, and that's where I also went. That was like the library that I would go to, is the store owner Skip and others. They would always turn me on to things like On You Sound catalog, Adrian Sherwood, the Wax Tracks catalog. So I was going there, seeing all these like super incredible punk musicians, buying the odd punk rock single, but also like keeping tabs on what was happening in electronic music, before I really like fully immersed myself into like the early house and techno kind of sounds.
Because I find that quite fascinating, because I think for a lot of people, the distance between industrial music and house music particularly would be quite wide,
It's quite wide, yeah.
But for you, was there a big distance, or was it all just kind of, part of the same thing in your mind?
I mean, you had groups like Depeche Mode. You had a lot of like, even to some extent, some of the Neubauten stuff, Frank Tovey, Fad Gadget. You had a lot of stuff that was part of one maybe genre, but also borrowing from another closely knit genre. For me, alternative, new wave, goth, industrial, in some ways like dub, it was all kind of occupying the same universe that I was, traveling through. And so I think maybe that opened up my creativity in terms of experimentation in the studio. Like I wasn't afraid to sample like a Test Department record for one of the early deep dish remixes or something that we did, or something from Neubauten or whatever, and kind of make it our own. So those influences have always been kind of in the background of my life, even to this day. I mean, I had an opportunity to work with Neubauten last year. I did a remix for the band, and was able to meet and become friends with Blixa, who I idolize. So in some ways, like throughout the years, and then Deep Dish, we a long time ago did a remix for Love and Rockets. I was a massive Bauhaus Love and Rockets fan. Our engineer that we were working with at the time happened to be producing their album, and that led to like a lifelong friendship with that band. So we've had these things happen throughout our career, whether individually or collectively as Deep Dish, where we've been able to meet our indie idols, and found a way to work with them. It's kind of going full circle back to your roots.
One thing you mentioned remixes, and one thing I've always found fascinating about Deep Dish was Deep Dish are very good at a lot of things. About DJing, make your own music, but one thing you're very good at is remixing. Mm-hmm. And something I find fascinating is there are a lot of very good, really, really good producers who aren't as good at remixing. Mm-hmm. And like I would put Deep Dish up at the absolute elite level of remixing your Carl Craigs, your Armand Van Heldens, people like that. It's something, obviously, I'd say not the only thing you can do, but like one of the why do you think you're so good at it?
I think because we never looked at the remix as, well, let's just take the original elements and beef it up, and keep more or less the same arrangement. We really tried to like completely take a different approach, because what would be the point of kind of reproducing something essentially in the same way? So we always tried to be as creative as possible, like chopping up the vocals, changing the arrangement, zeroing in on certain elements that we were given that were quite low in the original mix, and finding a creative way to chop those up and make them, bring them to the forefront. And we had we would often begin with drums. We had like a fascination throughout a whole career, and we still do, with like rhythm. So we always tried to find like the groove and the rhythm initially before throwing all the other elements in there. And I don't know, I think it was the pursuit of creativity that we had varying degrees of success or failure with on all the productions or remixes that we did throughout our whole career. I mean, when I look back and think back, and sometimes I listen to some of the older material, like some things still sound amazing and fresh, and some things I kind of cringe at. It's like a movie director watching their old films. It's like a time capsule also of what you were going through. Yeah, it's interesting. It looks like Sharam is.
Hey guys,
how you doing, Sharam?
Yeah, I'm great. How you guys doing?
Good, thanks. Good. Nice to speak to you. We were just talking remixes, and do you have a favorite of your remixes? I mean, there's many classics.
Me? I mean, there's so many. I mean, Resurrection Hex, I think, was one of the best. I thought we did.
That's the Love and Rockets remix that I just
Love
mentioned.
and Rockets. Oh, okay, there you go. So we're thinking the same. Probably also Dusted. always respect and honor your mother. I thought that was one of the ones that kind of stood the test of time. Obviously the obvious ones like the Lacy, a lot of people, refer to those, but some of the ones that I thought like, we would get crazy with some of the mixes and become really, the artists allowed us to become very creative. I think there was one Ether, I think it was for the stereo or something it was called. Remember what that one was called, Ali? It was one of the weirdest things we'd ever done.
I think it was for a label called Astralworks, but I know the one you're talking about.
So yeah, I think it was called Ether.
Yeah.
I came across it recently. I was like, man, that was weird.
It was like a very alternative, but it was Astralworks was like a really big alternative label at the time. But like also like you mentioned DeLacy, like that's a good example of us trying to bring like my industrial kind of drummy elements into like a soulful. I mean, the original is like a soulful kind of a diva vocal track from New Jersey, and we somehow managed to turn it in our pursuit of like trying to do the best remix that we can for like this UK label that was really hot at the time. We created something that is quite timeless and has a lot of those influences, that especially I brought into like the deep dish dynamic from like my indie kind of industrial roots.
Sharam, I wondered, like, we were talking a bit about your backgrounds, and you came to the US at the age of 14, I believe, and I think you've talked about how difficult it was to find music in post-revolutionary Iran, where Western music was illegal, right?
Correct.
I was just wondering, what was it like? What was your relationship with music like when?
I mean, it was underground. It was truly underground. Like a lot of people, the phrase underground means like, music that's kind of rare or has a very sort of particular following. I mean, I guess in that, for me, underground at the time meant you actually had to go through, into basements of like stores and houses where somebody had music and you would be able to get the tapes from them. So that's how, I would discover music through like whatever the remainders were from my older siblings. Like I remember listening to Boney M at a young age because my sister had a tape of it. And that was my first exposure to that music. There was a band name, it's like a European band name named Ali Gapu. I never understood who they were, but I went to Lebanon like years later, and these people in Lebanon, they knew the band. Nobody else knew the band, but I guess Lebanon, having gone through the same sort of situation that Iran had gone to, people find different ways to find music, and sometimes random music or like things that are not super popular in different parts of the world become your heroes. So I remember like, that's how I kind of like came across music. And then also I used to, my sister's husband had bought a Betamax VCR. At the time they were super rare. This is early 80s in Iran. And I had to find this underground shop we could rent Betamax tapes so we can watch movies or whatever. And I remember I rented, it was basically like a 1 hour recording of, I don't know if it was MTV or some sort of a music playing show out of UK or out of US where they would play videos. And I never returned the tape. I that's all I watched. I never returned it. And I figured out how to record that video onto a cassette tape using some sort of a hi-fi. It wasn't a hi-fi, just like a boombox that I had that I, figured out, I don't know how I ended up with it, but in Iran at that time, whatever you could get your hands on, you would. And I would make tapes, and I became quite popular in school because I was the only one that had the tape, and I would share the tape with all the other kids. And that was like, sort of became like an identity of mine, like music.
I remember when I met you, like you were also making a lot of tapes, like mixtapes, and giving it to people. That was the way we would promote ourselves, back then.
Maybe
before the internet and streaming and all this stuff.
Yeah, our friends would be like, "Hey, you have any mixtape for me?" You know, I remember like there was a guy there was a DJ at Trax nightclub in DC. His name was Tim Capman. I never met the guy, but his tapes were everywhere. I got some of his tapes, and he used to say, "DJ Mixmaster Tim Capman," and I was like, "Oh my god!" That's so. So when I read my first mixtape, I said, "DJ Mixmaster Sharam." So that people in school were like, "Can I have a deep Mixmaster Sharam tape?"
Yeah, we would search for mixes from the DJs we were following, like in Detroit, Chicago, New York. There was mix shows on the radio. Very hard to kind of get dialed in and get a clear signal, but there would be mix shows, and we would be there ready to like record the mixes. And so like that's how that music and that sound was proliferating, sort of in you know the culture, the dance music culture, dance music scene. That was like beginning, you know.
I still have the Mixmaster Tim Capman's mixtape. I have it in my archives.
So I wanted to go forward a little bit to your debut album, Junk Science, which came out in 1998, and it's a classic. And we were talking a bit earlier about the sort of mixture of rock and house. How did you hit on that? I mean, was that again your background in bands? That idea?
Bands on Ali. I think Ali was very into that. Like I had a very huge appreciation for rock music because when I arrived to America, my brothers were all into rock and roll. So Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Yes, all these kinds of like 70s psychedelic, progressive rock stuff. So I got really into all that stuff. I started listening to all that stuff.
I think Persians in general were really into prog rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
a lot of Persian friends, yeah, like they're into Marillion and Pink Floyd and Iron Butterfly and things like this.
Yeah. And then so Ali was actually in a band, goofing around with that stuff when, and that was like a way to express yourself. I never got into that stuff. My avenue was only through DJing. But then I think we started making music early on. We try to mimic New York sound and the Detroit sound, and then as we kept progressing, we both found ourselves going with these rock sort of patterns, rock sounds. Ali mentioned industrial stuff that was incorporated into the Lacey. So we kept bringing our influences, and rock was like other than house music and techno music, obviously, because we both were into that. Rock was this other way that we both arrived at the same point, creatively speaking. So we kept experimenting with that, and we're like, nobody's doing this right. So we always wanted to do things that nobody else was doing, but also be influenced by our own influences and incorporating all of it together. So I think that's how the whole Junk Science era was, us just fucking around with that, kind of bringing these, like the rock world and the dance and the house world and deep house and progressively. They were all, now there are so many names. At the time it was just house and techno, with deep house and techno. That's it. And there was obviously the Italo disco, which I was really influenced by heavily. The European kind of dance music. So all those things, when we're in the studio, all of those things converged. And we were not like, okay, well, I don't want to go here, or I don't like. We kept like experimenting. We were really open-minded about trying different things.
And then there's Monsoon, which seemingly out of nowhere is a massive drum and bass tune. Where did that come from?
We were both huge drum and bass followers. Huge. We used to buy drum and bass records and play them at 33, which sounded like a break record, but slower, but sounded amazing. We used to actually do shows like that.
I think the underlying layer was that we were always like super open-minded. We didn't feel the necessity to like stick to like a particular lane, stick in a particular lane. We were just sponges absorbing it all, especially when we started to come to the UK from, I think it was 1996 or so. The DeLacy remix, I think, maybe blew up in 95. and some of our singles also, you know, they were making waves in the UK. And when we did start to come to London, and we would spend like 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, and we would go to drum and bass parties. We would go to, you know, dub parties. Like we'd absorb as much as we could. We'd go to Notting Hill, Carnival, things like that.
What was that party? Wednesday night party at in London.
Well, there was like
to go to
Bar
that night.
Rumba. I remember Bar Rumba.
Yeah.
We used to go to a lot. We actually played a few times at Bar Rumba.
There was a drum and bass night there. That was
Yeah.
an unbelievable thing.
At Bar Rumba.
Shoot, I'm trying to figure out what it was called.
Yeah. We'd go to Swerve, which was like Fabio's night in London. I think
we
there
would
was
just go in. We didn't know anybody. We just go in.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, hey, we're the Deep Dish. Come on, like put us on the guest. There was no such thing. We paid. We went in. We just like, we were one of the punters. We just go and listen.
But we'd get recognized by certain people, and then they'd introduce us to the artists. That's why we had like a huge pool of very diverse artists as friends and fans, you know, that we sometimes see to this day.
Were people ever surprised to see you?
Sorry?
Were people ever like, what are you doing here? You're a house music, you know, duo.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was very, like these days, it seems people are very territorial and very protective of whatever genre they feel they're in. But back then it was quite open. I mean, I remember like when I first met James Lavelle, like he remembered me. We had some, you know, a bunch of success with the early Deep Dish releases. Carl Craig was a part of a few of those, and Carl was tight with James Lavelle, and I met James through Carl. And Uncle was still like a really big thing. And I used to, when I was a hip hop and like acid jazz soul DJ, I was like reporting to Straight No Chaser magazines with my charts. And when James met me, he's like, yeah, I always wondered who this Dubfire guy is with all this amazing music that he was charting in this magazine, that James was like a big part of, you know, from Washington, D.C. Like he'd be like, who is this guy from Washington, D.C.? And so like, and I'm good friends with James to this day, and we had that kind of in common. So we were embraced, you know, by like all these different kind of scenes. And I think that also helped propel Deep Dish and our sound forward, you know, especially in the UK and in Europe, you know.
I remember like because drum and bass is one of the only scenes early on that was very territorial. So like your records were either coming from that community or you're not accepted. But I remember we took the acetate, we took it to a bunch of DJs and they played it. And it was like the most unbelievable thing. Like we just gave them like a white label, like an acetate, and they would play it.
Yeah.
And then we were like we were just like, oh my God, these motherfuckers are so cool. They're playing on record.
It's a heavy song.
What's that?
It's a heavy song.
Heavy song? What do you mean?
Wait, which one is that? The
Monsoon's a very heavy song.
Oh, Monsoon. Yeah.
I mean, we realized that we were not as prolific in terms of studio trickery as those guys, and that was kind of like our first. And we didn't try to compete. We're like, look, that's the thing they do. We can't try to compete with that. We just got to create our own version of what we feel. I mean, some of the, like even today, some of the like the sound design and drum and bass, it takes hours to come up with like these little drops. I'm like, geez, these people like mad scientists.
Yeah,
you know?
it was an amazing. It still is an amazing sound. I remember like we did remixes for Adam F and DJ Rap as well.
That's one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite. The Adam F record was one of my all-time favorite remixes.
Yeah, and I think that's because like they'd heard the Monsoon track and they knew that they were seeing us at the drum bass nights and they knew that we were fans. And so, yeah, there was a lot of mutual respect. People weren't really standoffish. Like, hey, why are you guys, you know, enjoying our music, you know? And coming to our parties, you know, like everybody was really like open and respectful.
Yeah,
and
we'd go like Ronnie Size, Metalheads, like all those. Like we were just heavily into like knowing all those guys.
Yeah,
and they were open to us, like trying to be, complimentary to what they do.
Moving forward again, your second
Yeah.
album, George is On. What do you
Yeah.
think? What was the big difference between Junk Science and George is On?
I think that was us fully exploring. Like we were more confident by that point, in the studio and in the kind of experimentation we were doing, and we were really, from when I reflect on it, we were really, really heavily pushing the alternative indie thing, into it. And I think like that album began, really the catalyst was like this idea that Sharam had of like reworking Flashdance,
Yeah.
and the guitars in that, like, that spoke to me, and that made me want to continue to forge down that path and maybe, make other guitar dance kind of records that maybe weren't as like playful or happy sounding, bit darker. That's where like Sacramento and some of the other album tracks come into play. But yeah, it was really, I mean, we were doing re-edits of Coldplay and White Stripes songs, and playing them in our sets. We were really, really pushing a heavy kind of indie sound around that time. And I think it also connected with our audience. Some, like, I'm sure we lost some along the way. Like some were fully more embracing like traditional house sounds. But the ones that stayed with us, like, really helped make Flashdance and Say Hello, I think two of our biggest hits.
Would it be fair to say you split in 2006?
Yeah, we were having a lot of creative differences, other issues. I think we'd been together for a really long time. We spent like all of our time together. You're spending all that time in the studio. You're spending all that time like running the businesses, like the record labels, and then you're spending the rest of the time that you have left on the road with each other. And so like that took its toll. And we really understood why bands, I mean, we're obviously not a traditional band, but we understand why, like, bands like the Beatles or Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, whatever, like why they ended, because it's you have all these personalities and you're always together, and after a while it becomes like a bit suffocating, creatively and physically and in other ways that we came to realize.
Feel like we're beating up on him physically,
Yeah. We just, I think we needed a break. We had things that we wanted to explore, musical ideas that maybe weren't necessarily appropriate for what we were doing as Deep Dish, and we really wanted to explore them. Like there was a need to get that out, and I think we both, took a, like a break, and much needed break, and yeah, I mentioned that, getting back to 2014, maybe the timing wasn't right, but we really feel like the timing is totally right now. So
yeah, so in 2025, you're back again. You've got DJ dates. There is new music coming out. Yeah, what's the plan?
We have a ton of, I mean, we weren't sure what we would sound like, but once we got into the studio again in September of last year, Sharam brought a lot of ideas in that he'd been working on. I brought a few of my own, and then we did a writing camp in LA that was really, really fruitful. And between then and now, we just been kind of like trying to finish off everything. And we have pretty much an album's worth of material now that's going to be released initially as singles. And then we're looking forward to doing more writing camps. We have one in London that we're going to be doing in early May. We'll probably do one in New York, and we'll get back to doing another one like in LA. So, and we found some amazing, singers. We have our first single coming out with a singer named Wrabel, and it's a collaboration with a trio from the UK named EYNKA, which are making quite a big noise, and they have those the same indie sensibilities that we do. We feel like we're kindred spirits, I guess, in some way, and we're really excited about that. And that's going to be followed up with something probably in early June with a vocalist named Malu that we discovered when we worked with Toby Scott and Paul Harris. Paul used to be with Dirty Vegas, so he's a longtime friend of ours, and he's more behind the scenes now as a songwriter. And so, yeah, we're just we're really enjoying the collaborations, and we're trying to make sure that every thing that we do is a unique song.
I think when this comes out, people will have heard maybe one song, but how would you describe what you're doing, the new music?
I mean, yeah, I think
all over the place.
Yeah, no, it's really like, you have obviously with the success of like Tale of Us, Solomon, to some extent Fortet, like the indie dance sound is alive and quite healthy these days. And it's now absorbed even more genres and influences to make it even more unique to this day. And at the same time, like progressive house seems to be having a major comeback as well. You can just see it with the success that, Sasha Digweed are having, Hernan Catano. And I think, in many ways, like the Tale of Us sound is kind of like the classic progressive blueprint sound, like updated as well. So we've always been a bit prog, a bit indie. And so for us, it's like the perfect time, I guess, where, like what's happening musically, the sound of now is really in sync with like where we are, as individual artists who went solo and learned a lot as solo artists about ourselves individually, explored a lot of our ideas individually, and now can take all those ideas and with what people are gravitating towards today, which is our core sound, bring it all together in a new way.
Yeah, it was actually very interesting because I was about to say the same thing that Ali said. When we sort of decided to like do our own solo stuff, one of the things that always bothered us is like they people put us together as if we cannot exist separately, and we always kind of rebel against it. We're like, look, we're two different individuals, we're two different DJs. Before we met, we both had our own sort of path, musically speaking, and we brought all of it together, and we can both stand on our own feet without the other, And it was kind of like a subconscious thing for us to prove that to the world. And along the way, we did some amazing things individually, and we also did some crazy things, and it became like learning platform for us. So a lot of the mistakes that people would make, we kind of make on as solo artists. We didn't make those mistakes with Deep Dish. So now we're coming back with all that wealth of knowledge of what to do, what not to do. And we're lucky enough to be able to have this new opportunity to put it all back together. And we're both in a good place where we don't need to prove anything to anybody else, but just ourselves.
And what was it like when you got back in the studio? Was it like the same kind of magic was there, or did you have to sort of? Was there a moment of like trying to work out how to work together again, or was it just kind of straight from the start?
I think it's fluid. We thought it would be kind of weird, but our DJ sets from day one. I mean, we didn't DJ for 10 years together, and then we DJ together. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, you guys sounded so in sync." We know when we're really in sync and when we're not, and we're able to like make that adjustment. And it's like second nature at this point. I think people think it's a lot more complicated. I mean, maybe we should make it sound like a lot more complicated, but I think it just comes quite naturally, and we're able to. The yin and the yang knows how to take care of itself. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's like, "Oh, I feel like this," and the other guy's like, "No, I want to go there." We give each other the room to operate.
Yeah, I think what we were, when we're playing together it's like one song each. And like when Sharam, I mean, he's always playing music that I'm like, oh my God, it's just like how it used to be. Like when we used to play in the early days, we were trying to one up each other, you know, like impress each other with like, you know, the kind of music that we discovered. So there's a lot of that again. Like, wow, what is this song? You know, or like, you know, when we went into the studio together, Sharam brought like initially like a lot of like really great ideas that when I heard, I was just like, oh my God, this is like a great jumping off point for me, you know, creatively to give it, you know, my input. And we just kind of go back and forth like that until it takes shape. And it's become quite effortless, to be honest with you. You know, there was no real struggle that I can think of that we had in getting the new music done. It was just all coming together really nicely.
Well, as a fan, can I just say I'm very pleased you're back together. Sharam, I was saying this kind of earlier to Ali that it's obviously I'm musically glad you're back together, but it's also, I don't know, it's quite nice to, you know, just see how back together.
That makes us feel good. Thank you.
On a personal level. Yeah. One last question, if I may. You've been very generous with your time. Is there one like deep dish song? What would you play to someone who had never heard of you, and you were like, okay, no, this is what we do?
You know what's so funny? I was hanging out with these people in Miami, and they're all into this Romanian sound. And they're like, oh, you know, they're all like, trying to figure out what our new sound is going to be like, what we're working on. I'm playing some stuff for them. And, you know, and then they keep playing me these records, which, you know, Ali is heavily into this stuff, which, you know, they call it the Romanian sound, which basically like these endless loops, really funky, awesome loop, you know, which, you know, like I appreciate it because I was into like, you know, we both into like Basic Channel, which was like one loop forever, but you could never get enough of it. And and just the way the arrangement and all this stuff is, and I told one of the guys, I'm like, hold on, I got something I want to play for you. And I played him a song that we had done years ago called DC Depressed, Come Back, which is actually, interesting enough, is actually a big record in the Romanian scene. And I'm like, I was listening to it and I hadn't like heard it. I just played it for them. And I'm like, shit, this sounds like it was made yesterday. They said that it sounds like it was made yesterday. So in our catalog, we have a few records that are like kind of like that. So I would say that one record, like, you know, is one of those things like just the way it's arranged. There's no like hands in the air moment. There's no like breakdown. It's just the arrangement is quite
like pure groove, which is what those
groove.
Romanian records are about. Yeah. I mean, there's stuff that I think like they're considered classics for other people, and then there's things that I think Sharam and I are both in agreement that like Come Back record is one of those timeless things that we've done that still sounds, you know, fresh today. So I would say the same. Yeah.
With a title like that, I think it's a good
yeah. Yeah, actually, I didn't think about that, but yeah.
Perfect. Well, look, Ali, Sharam, thank you so much for speaking to me today. It's been a pleasure. As I say, I'm very glad you're back.
Thank you.
And hoping to catch you at some point this summer. I'm sure I will. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
You're listening to Radio Primavera Sound, proudly presented by Cupra.